I explain this quite often, so if I'm repeating myself, please forgive me, but maybe there are some people here who aren't familiar with this ritual that we do. And the ritual begins with paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. We do that 3 times. And that you would call bhakti in the Indian tradition. It's the act of devotion to the teacher. And sometimes like a Buddha image might be too abstract for you. So you might put, you might have a picture of Ajahn Chah or Ajahn Sumedho or Sri Ramana Maharshi or whatever teacher really affects you strongly in terms of Dhamma. And then to that shrine, you make offerings. You make offerings of flowers, incense, light, candles, water. And in that sense of offering, you are expressing this deep sense of heartfelt gratitude. And also, I would say, a deep felt sense of optimism, because the Buddhist teaching is very optimistic. It's different than climate change. If you just look at news about climate change, it's pretty depressing. Might be true, I don't know. But the idea of paying homage to the Buddha is that the Buddha said we had the potential to realize profound peace and profound compassion, all of us who are sitting here. So you want to move to that sense of devotion and gratitude, and creating a shrine and making offerings is that sense of heartfelt optimism and gratitude. I do that with many pictures in my room. I have a large picture of Ajahn Sumedho, a large picture of Ajahn Chah. I have various teachers that have helped me from other traditions. I have my mother, I have my dad. So I can't read much anymore. I just look at pictures all the time. And it's actually very powerful, because it brings to heart very, very easily the sense of love, heartfelt love and gratitude that we can all feel. And to me, that seems to be so terribly important, because our aspiration is non-desire. And what love is non-desire in this sense, or gratitude. So sometimes these teachings are very formulaic. You do Namo Tassa, and then you do the 3 refuges, and then you do the precepts, and they become a kind of formula that Buddhists use, which is nice. But you always want to enliven it. You don't want it just to be a kind of dead tradition. And you can enliven it just by getting a heart sense of what those words might mean for you. So that's homage to the Buddha, the kind of bhakti part. Then the refuges, then the next part is Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami 3 times. And again, I explain this often, but the word Buddha, the way I've been educated towards how you might use that word, is first and foremost, there is the teacher. But also the teacher, the Buddha, said that when you see the Dharma, you see the Buddha. When you see the Buddha, you see the Dharma. So one of the ways to think about that refuge in Buddha is the awakened mind. So right now I can you hear a chipping in the background? Hi, that's a chipmunk, right? And he's doing what chipmunks do. They do this, okay? So I'm aware, I know that this is a chipmunk. I'm awake to the fact it's a chipmunk. If I get annoyed at the chipmunk, stop doing that, then I can know that too. I can be awake. So being awake doesn't mean I feel good or bad about anything. It's just I know what's going on. I like it, I dislike it. So that is refuge, because it is something that you can trust in. You can trust in the awake mind. right? The Buddha as historical person, well, you can have devotion to that, but you don't really know that. What you really know is that life is like this now. So that's why refuge is a place of trust in the heart. And how could, life is like this. It's very, very obvious. And if you trust in that, that leads you to Dharma. So Dhammang saranang gacchami, I take refuge in Dharma. That can be the teaching. And we all need to study the teaching. Four Noble Truths, Anicca Dukkha Anatta, Paticca Samuppada, all these different very good teachings that we have. But those are still abstracts. They're still intellectual conventions, which are pointing to something we need to realize. And then that realization that we have ourselves, the truth of anicca, the truth of the Four Noble Truths, is something that informs our insightful part of our consciousness. So then not only is there the awake mind, but there's the awake mind which has wisdom. And that wisdom, that insightful wisdom, that realized wisdom is something you take refuge in. It's kind of like, say the law of gravity. You know the way the law of gravity works. You don't need someone to explain it to you. Because if you're on a ladder, you're going to be very careful because you know you'll fall down, you won't fall up. That's the law of gravity. That's the Dharma of gravity. You know that. So in the same way, the Dharma of the heart, the Dharma of suffering and the end of suffering is something you realize more and more and more and more. And that becomes the way you perceive the world, you interact with the world. You take refuge in that. Take refuge in that knowing of Dharma. And one of the ways we think about that is sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Refuge in Sangha, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami, is, again, Sangha is used, sometimes there's the Bhikkhu Sangha, so I'm part of the Bhikkhu Sangha, sometimes the larger community of practitioners, Sangha, but what does, like, I can't really take refuge in other people because they die or they get sick or they're disappointing, or in my case, they disrobe. So what does Sangha represent? It represents the lifestyle that we have. And the lifestyle is one of morality, compassion, concern for our fellow beings, concern for our own hearts, non-violence, honesty, fidelity, truthfulness, all these things. So that's a refuge in the sense that you can trust in non-violence. You can trust in non-corruption. You can trust in fidelity because they will take you to good places. Whereas if you trust in violence or corruption, they will take you to bad places, right? So that like, say for me, when I see another bhikkhu who is in this forest tradition, and I know he's a practitioner and so on, that always inspires me because, oh yes, this is a samana. This is someone who's on the path of practice. So Sangha then is the life that we lead, the life of goodness. Buddhang, Dhammang, Sanghang. We'd say that 3 times. And then the precepts are sometimes, as you know, sometimes we take 5 precepts, sometimes 8 precepts. What does that mean? Well, the 8 precepts are the model that we use in monasteries and retreats. And they are composed of ethical or moral precepts and what we call renunciant precepts. So the ethical part is included in the 5 precepts, but the renunciant parts are in situations where we have a chance to make life more simple. So the 5 precepts, the moral precepts are not killing, not stealing, not lying, not taking drugs to change consciousness, and being faithful in relationships. So they cover the kind of basic ethical, moral parameters and boundaries that we live by. And then the renunciant precepts are precepts in, say, in a monastery. So the precept on fidelity becomes celibacy in a monastery. It makes life simple. There's nothing immoral about sexual activity, but in a monastery, it's not necessary. So it just simplifies everything. Also, the precept of not eating after midday is not a moral precept. It's a precept to simplify life. So no one has to cook in a kitchen after 12 o'clock. Great. The precept on not having entertainments, that's not a moral precept. It's not wrong to listen to Tchaikovsky or the Grateful Dead or whoever you like to listen to. That's just preferences. But in a monastery, we don't have access to that. So again, it simplifies things. But it also means that the mind has less avenues of distraction. There's less distraction to go into. And then there's a strange precept to not sleep in high and luxurious sleeping places in the 8 precepts. And people ask, what is that about? I have to throw my bed out? Well, it comes from the time of the Buddha, when to have a mattress must have been very luxurious. And then a mattress with springs must have been very, very luxurious. And bed sheets and pillows, you would probably be a Raja to have that. And the principle behind that was that if you get too comfortable in life, if you're just too comfortable, you won't have the kind of asceticism to really work hard on your practice. You become lazy, and comfort can make you lazy. So really, it's just about, don't be lazy. Be diligent. Have a good sleep. Don't throw out your mattress. Don't worry about it, but be diligent. Don't just use the time of this birth to sleep another 14 hours a day or whatever it might be. That's an extreme, I know. So anything I could say about this, but perhaps we could, so for those of you who are in family situations where the 8 precepts are not reasonable, don't worry about it. Just devise something that works for you in terms of like food, say. You don't have to keep the 8 precepts, but you can put a discipline around yourself around not nibbling or not grazing, right? Because when you feel bored, what do? You have a donut or whatever you do. And to actually put constraints and limits on that possibility of eating, not because it's immoral, but just to watch how the mind wants distraction, how it likes to go out into sense experience. And again, it's not a moral thing, but it does make you restless. When you always have access to sense experience, which is exciting or interesting or distracting, your mind doesn't, it's harder for the mind to touch the deep silence, which means you have to stay home rather than go outside all the time. So for those of you who are not taking the 8 precepts, just figure out a way that works for your family, because you don't want to be a nuisance to your family. And yet you want your family to know, yeah, this is a special time for me.